Let's begin. We're going to be covering a specific topic in Excel. We're going to be covering lists. And if you want, you can mark down how many times I say lists during this session. It will be quite a lot. So we all make lists. Lists are easy to make. We love a good list. To-do lists, you've maybe got customer lists, contacts lists, sales order lists, lots of different things that we keep in lists. And Excel is a great tool for doing that. But I want to make sure that you're able to do more than just scroll through your list, more than just view your list. I want to make sure you're getting the most out of it. So I'm going to introduce a few features that are going to help you work with these contact lists or whatever lists that you have a lot more efficiently. I'm going to cover topics such as sorting, filtering. There'll be a few handy tips and shortcuts thrown in for good measure. We'll also maybe touch on an advanced filter, but don't worry, it's not as difficult as it sounds. It's just taking the basic filter and just giving it a couple of more options. Let's begin. I will be using Excel 2016, so Excel 2016. If you're not on this version, that's not a problem. All the things that I'll be showing you, you can do in all versions of Excel, 2010, 2017, 2013. Okay, so everything will be appropriate for your version of Excel, so nobody's left without. We can't have that, can we? So on my screen here, what I've got here is a list, surprisingly. A list of customer contact details, and maybe I've sent them out a MailChimp or a survey, something like that, and I want to check who's replied. Okay, I need to know who it's getting out to, who's replying, so I can know what's successful, know what to follow up on. And here's my list. I've got 5 columns, so a name, date of birth, age, the location, the town, and whether or not they've replied. Here's the first tip. Here's just a starter. I've got quite a large list here. I don't know how many rows are in it, but first of all, maybe I want to highlight it all. Maybe I want to select it all because I want to change the formatting or something like that. The last thing I want to be doing is going like this with my mouse, scrolling all the way down, when I can just click inside the list, press 2 keys, the control key and the letter A for all. Selects all my list. That could be 1,000 people, it could be 10,000 people, 2 buttons, and I've selected every single item in that list. So that was control and the letter A. The next one, I don't know where this list ends. It could end on row 100, 1,000, but I want to get to the last entry. I'm not going to be using my mouse wheel. I don't know if you can hear this noise. I don't want to hear that noise. You know, you hear that up and down offices all over the country. People wearing away the skin on their fingers with that mouse wheel. So here's the next tip. When you want to go to the end of your list, you don't know where it stops, use the control key and press the down arrow. So 221 is the last entry in my list. The way that works, it stops when it sees a blank. So good practice is in your list, try not to have any blank rows or any blank columns. I could then say, press control and the right arrow takes me to the other edge of the list. Control up takes me back to the top. How good is that? Okay, I'm sure you're all impressed with that because I certainly am. To extend on that then, maybe I want to highlight an entire column. Maybe I want to highlight all the people that have replied. I know now that control and the down arrow, it just moves my cursor. But let's say I want to shift that up here and highlight it as well. What key can I add in? Did I give the clue away in the question? So I can press Control, Shift, and the down arrow. Highlights that entire column. Brilliant. So there'll be no more scrolling, no more wasting away the skin on your finger when you use the Control and the arrow keys and Shift to highlight. So let's carry on with this list. What we first of all want to get it in some sort of order. It's not in any order at the moment, so it's not sorted. So I'm going to look at sorting this list. First of all, let's keep it simple. I want to do a simple sort. It's a misconception that you have to highlight everything before you do a sort. You don't, as long as you're clicked within the column that you want to sort by. And there's various ways of sorting. I could right click, I could do it from the quick option, the home tab, but I try to get people, when they're dealing with lists of data, go to the data tab. Why? Because you've got access to everything that you can do with the list. Whereas if you're right-clicking, you're perhaps missing out on some really cool features. So a simple sort, I've got my A to Z or Z to A. If I click A to Z, it sorts the list alphabetically. No surprises here, but Z to A, it just sorts it reverse alphabetically. If I was doing that in a number field, even though it's A to Z and Z to A, it will sort it numerically. There we go, we've got a 104-year-old person in this list, and has replied. How good is that? Okay, let me sort that again by town. So it's first of all sorted in town order. Maybe that's fine for me. Or maybe, as you can see, I've got a lot of people in Durham. Okay, lots of people in Durham. I maybe then want to sort the people within the towns I've already sorted in age order. I couldn't just do that using the simple sort by going to this column and sorting, because it's not going to keep the original sort. What I have to do in that case is do something called a custom sort, or as I like to call it, the big sort button. Big sort button up here, it allows me to define levels. So I've already set a sort by one level, which is by town. So if I then want to sort within that sort, I add another level and say, once you've sorted by town, I then want you to sort by age, smallest to largest. Perhaps then I've got, let's see if I can see here, I've got two people in Durham that are 57. If I've got an extra level of sort to put on, I just click add level. Once you're sorted by age, sort by DOB, date of birth, oldest to newest, and click OK. Didn't take me any length of time, but now I've got a custom sorted list, sorted by town, then by age, and then by date of birth. Nothing too difficult there, but my it's in order now. It's in the order that I want it, and that's what we like. We like our data to be in order. Two things there, the simple sort and the custom sort. Now, how many people do I have in Bristol? I can easily see that because I've sorted it. I've got two people. I've got one person in Carlisle. How many people in Durham? I could count them all. I could select them all, and it tells me down on the status bar down here. And I could do that for each of them, but that's going to take me time. I want to see how many people I've got in each town all at once. I want it all on the screen at one time. I don't want to be messing about by highlighting and doing various things like that. What I really want is at every change in town, so when the town changes to a new location, I want Excel to subtotal my data. I want it to summarize. And you might have seen something like this. So let me show you how we do this. I want my list to be subtotaled, and I'm going to tell it at each change in town, summarize the data to tell me how many people are in that area. And that's the reason I want you to go to the data tab, because you might not know it exists if you're always just clicking by right clicking. So what I want to do, I have to click anywhere inside my list first of all, and then I click on subtotal. And now there's a couple of questions to fill in. I want to know at each change in town, so I'm going to change the first one to town, how do I want to summarize? And you can see there's various options in here. If I wanted to maximum, find the average, I can do various things, but all I want it to do is do a simple count and count how many people have replied. So it's going to count on the text, but watch what this does when I click OK. Done a few things. It's summarized it exactly as I want. So if I scroll down, you'll see every time the location sort changes, I get a number of how many people are in that particular location, which is great. It's also applied an outline to it. So across here, if I click on the number 1, it gives me an overall total, so the high overview level. Number 2, overview of particular towns, and then level number 3 is back to everything. I can build on that if I wanted to change it to show me the average age of people, the maximum age of people, I just changed my settings in the subtotal option. So I could say at each change in town, use the function average and apply that to the age column. So as quick as you like, I can see the average age of people in Bristol, according to my survey, is 53.5, and so on and so forth. I use that myself all the time, so it is a really good time saver as well. So I highly recommend using that if you want to summarize or subtotal your data. And if you don't always need it switched on, you just go back up to subtotal and click remove all. Brilliant, so that's the subtotal feature. So let's move on to filtering. You know, we've got a list, we don't need to see it all at once, so we need to start applying filters. Again, you don't have to highlight anything. Some people I see will still highlight the top row. You know, you don't have to. It's not going to break your list, but you certainly don't need to do it. All you have to do, make sure your active cell is in the list and click on filter. This is the auto filter, so it's applied the drop down arrow next to every heading, which allows me, if I only want to see people from Bristol, okay, what I could do, and what most people will do, is unclick select all, and then click on the one that they want, which is absolutely fine. It's going to get the results, but can you imagine if you had, say, every single city in the UK in here, and the one that you want is maybe far down by the bottom, say it's Yeovil. Okay, Yeovil starts with a Y. Don't ask me where that is, I don't know. I know that it starts with a Y, and that would be at the bottom of my list. So I'd have to, again, scroll all the way down. So rather than do that, if I do that again, click on still the filter, instead of going to this part, I just start typing. So if I want to see everybody from Tynemouth, I start typing it, and it automatically only selects that one. I click OK, and there we have it. To clear the filter, again, I'm going to show you what I don't want you to do, what I see people doing. They switch off the filter altogether when they still need it. So rather than doing that, I know it's a big button and you want to press it, but rather than do that, when you have a filter on, just click clear. Okay, you can just click clear here. It keeps the auto filter on, but you're clearing your criteria. So next, maybe I want to filter, I've done Durham, that's great, so I'll clear that. I then perhaps want to look at people's ages. So I'll click in the age column. If I only want to see people that are less than 65, I'm tempted to unclick everyone that is over 65 or whatever, but again, a lot of clicking when I can go into a number filter and say less than 65. Okay, and it's done that for me there. Same with date of birth. We've done a text filter, we've done a number filter. We can also do a date filter. So if I want to see date filters, you know, any of these criteria here, it saves me having to select each one individually. So that was 3 types of data that we can filter by. Another one is, and I'll give you a clue here, let's say I had some sort of color coding, that all the Ys were formatted. So my list, wherever I've got it from, if I've created it, there is some sort of color coding in place that perhaps all the Ys are green and all the Ns are red. Okay, so what else can I filter by? I think I've made that one a little bit too obvious. Yep, you can filter by color. Which color I want to filter by, and it filters out just like so. So if you've got a color-coded list, the colors mean something to you, make them do even more for you by filtering on the color of the cell. Let me just clear those colors here just now. So I'm just highlighting these, and to clear the formatting, I'm just going to my home tab, clicking clear and clicking clear formats. Okay, and I'll recenter it. Perfect. That's the simple auto filter. I mentioned at the start there is another feature which is called the advanced filter, and that allows you to do things that you can't do with the auto filter, and I'll show you what these things are. So I want to set up an advanced filter. Let me just first of all switch off my auto filter. In order for me to set up the advanced filter, what I have to do I'm going to just insert 5 rows at the top. So I'm selecting 5 rows, right-clicking, and insert, which will give me 5 new rows rather than do each one at a time. I then need to take a copy of my headings and just paste them up here. Because what the advanced filter does, it allows me to type in my criteria up here. It will then apply that filter to the list, which is good for a couple of reasons. It allows me to actually see on my Excel spreadsheet without having to go into the filter what my criteria are. So all I have to do is say, okay, I want to see everybody that's less than 40 years old from Newcastle, and have they replied yes. So that's what I want to see. So that's what I've typed in. And now you're thinking, oh, that's not actually done anything. And you're right, it's not, because I have to click in my list, tell it I want to do an advanced filter. The list is automatically selected. I just have to tell the advanced filter where my criteria is. So it's up here, heading and first row, and click OK. So it's filtered the list. So there is only one person from Newcastle that's less than 40 years old that has replied. So I can see my criteria and I can see the results. I clear the filter in exactly the same way. So that's my advanced filter. What else is the advanced filter good for? Well, let me show you. If I change, let me just say, I only want to see people from Newcastle that have replied, but I need to extract that information. I don't want it to affect this list. I want this list to remain untouched. You can only do that with the advanced filter. And the way I do that, same as before, criteria range is going to be the same, but in this instance, I want to copy the extracted results or the filtered list to another location. And click OK. Well, before I click OK, tell it where to copy it to. And initially, it has to be on the same sheet. So I'm just going down here, clicking OK. And once I go back down there, my results will be there. Okay, so the filtered results are down here. It initially has to be on the same sheet, but there's nothing stopping me then taking a copy and pasting that elsewhere. So I could have various snapshots of the list by extracting it using the advanced filter. And real quick, I'll just go back in here and show you the third benefit. If you've got a list of lots of duplicates, you can actually filter it and tell the advanced filter, only show me the unique records. I don't want to see the duplicates. So another benefit of the advanced filter there as well. Okay, so how many times have I said lists so far? Let's see if we can double that by the end of the session. Now, let's move to this second tab here. So I'm going to my customer list. This could be something I've extracted from a system. Maybe it's from a MailChimp, a database. I've got my list from somewhere, and I need to tweak it a little bit, because what I've got here is the email address, but I need to extract from that the person's first name, the person's second name, and perhaps the full name. Okay, let me just change that to full name. So I want to have person's first name, the person's second name, and the full name. But at the moment, all I've got is an email address. So that's what I want to do in this case. Maybe you've done something like this before. Maybe you've used something called text to columns, which I will come back to shortly. Maybe you've used a function. There are various text functions such as left, right, where you're extracting text from one column. But here's a new feature that came into Excel in 2013. It's something called flash fill, and it's very flash. Let me just warn you. Watch what I'm going to do. So I've got the email address here. It's made up of the first name and thebusiness.com. What do I want? What's this person's first name? Their first name is Maureen. So let me just type it. The person in row 2, their first name is Bev. Okay, so when I start typing it, hopefully you've noticed what's happened there. Excel has predicted a pattern. All I have to do now is press one button, which is return or enter, and it's done the whole list for me because it's recognized what I maybe want to do. It's quite clever, isn't it? Second name, even less work for me to do here. Type in the second name of Maureen and start typing the second name of the person in the second row. Again, it's predicted everything. Okay, if you've not fallen off the floor with excitement, watch me do this as well. Maureen, I'm putting in her full name now, and it's going to be clever enough once I start typing here to do that for everybody. Now, if you were to do something like that before you came on the session, how much time, knowing that little trick, how much time is that going to save you? Okay, give yourself a flash fill this afternoon. Go on, be a little bit adventurous. So that's flash fill. It's also available up in the data tab by clicking flash fill. If you've got Excel 2010, I hate to tell you, but flash fill isn't available. Okay, so it's just not going to happen for you. But I can't leave you out. So if I go back to the survey tab and use this example, so I want to split this name box or the name column up into two: first name, second name. So let me real quick add in two columns here. So first name. So this is an alternative if you don't have that flash fill option. What you can do is use that text columns that I showed you. First of all, I have to highlight on my first column, and we know that now that I can do Control-Shift down arrow, selects the entire column. And then, what do I want to do? I want to break that column up into two columns. So I'm going to click Text to Columns. What is this going to do for me? It's going to ask me, well, at what point in that column do you want me to break it? Where is the split? And Excel needs something called a delimiter. So a delimiter is something that can be identified where to break that column. And in this case, we can see that there's a space. So in this case, the space is going to be the delimiter. But depending on your data, it could be a semicolon, it could be a comma, space, even another character. And you can type that in. In this case, I'm just going to click space. And you can see the preview of exactly what it's going to do. And that's just what we want. I click next. One thing to be careful of here, the destination, where it's going to put this two columns, it automatically wants to overwrite what I've got here. But I don't want that, which is why I've put that new column in here. So I'm going to say in this case, destination is here. And click finish. And there we go. It's achieved the same end result as what the flash fill did for me. Maybe not so flash, but certainly a lot quicker than typing out, doing a lot of cut, copying, and pasting text to columns. You can also use text to columns fixed width. So say you don't have a delimiter. Let me just show you this real quick. If I type in, maybe you've got a reference number, REF 123 AB, and then 76. And all the parts of this reference are made up of different components, and you want to split that into the different components. There's no delimiter this time. It's just a string of text. But what I can do in this case is say text to columns, fixed width, and next, and then I can concentrate real hard and say I want to split it there, there, and there. Next and finish, and it just splits that up into all the different columns. So if there's not a delimiter, it's a full text string, you can use the fixed width option. Okay, let me just skip to this website data tab. So let me explain what's happened. You've been put in charge of your company's website, and every month you get a report coming out like this one here to show how popular the website is. So to see which page has got the most comments, the most views, who's the most popular author, various things like that. And it's your job to report on that information. So every month you get this report and you have to report back to say, well, Tom's had the most popular blog post with 100 page views and 5 comments. Justin has had the most popular services page with 5 tweets. Various information like that. You need to report on that. So let me show you, first of all, the long way to do that. So if I took this report into a meeting, somebody asked me the question, what is the average page views for Justin's blog posts? So I can see I've got all my headings here. So I might be inclined, based on what we've just learned about filters, turn on my filter and say I only want to see information for Justin and his page type of blog posts. Okay, I'll say blog posts. So now I've got just that information is in front of me now. Justin's blog posts. From here, if I just expand this down a bit so I can see more, I can see we've got his page views here. I can see all the numbers for all his blog posts. From here, here's another little quick tip that you might find useful as well. If I quickly want to get an average of all these numbers, if I just select these numbers here, take a look down at the status bar, and it's given me statistics on the cells that I've got highlighted. So I can see the sum of them is 17,000, whatever the max is, the min is, the count, and average. And if you've never tried that before, and if you try it and if you don't see the max and min, if you right click, it just gives you the option to say what you want to have switched on. So now I've answered that question. I've said Justin's average page views for his blog posts, and then I look down here and it's that number here. Brilliant, that's answered that question. Somebody else then asked me a different question. So based on doing it by a filter, I would just go in and again, select the criteria, highlight the cells that I need and give them the answer. And however good that is, we love filters by now, but if I'm doing it that way, reporting on this list that way, it's going to take me quite a long time. That's where we need something called, okay, drum roll here, pivot tables. Maybe you've heard of pivot tables. Maybe you've heard the word and you just take a stand back and think, that's something that's really complicated. And to be honest, it's not. It's a great way of analysing your list data and reporting back on all sorts of information about it. Pivot tables, you know, they can be quite involved. So I'd love to have time to go into all the ins and outs of pivot tables with you today, but unfortunately, not this time. However, if I give you the fundamentals of how to set up a pivot table and how they actually work, it's going to give you that knowledge to build on that yourself, to maybe come back on an advanced Excel session and look at pivot tables in more detail. But it's going to give you that underlying knowledge to make you maybe not scared of pivot tables. We don't have to be scared of pivot tables. So how do I set up a pivot table? Let me just first of all switch off this filter. Anything that I want to put into Excel, I want to insert something. So handily, it's under the Insert tab. So under Insert, button here across at the left-hand side, Pivot Table. And notice I've not selected my list or my data. My cell active is currently inside it. So that's all I have to do, because when I click on Pivot Table, you can maybe see that flashing line around it. And that just means it's picked up my entire list. Another reason not to have any blank rows, not to have any blank columns. You don't really need blank rows and columns in a list. People just do it for the visual appearance of having that white space. But if you need that white space, just make your rows bigger rather than putting in a blank row. Okay, so it's picked up my data range. I'm going to click OK. But what we want to do is start thinking about what information we want in our table. And when we think of a table, we've got columns and rows. And then within the cells of the table is the information that's counting, or the data part of it. So what have we got here? How can we construct our table like that? Well, if you look across here, in the pivot table fields, all these items here relate to the headings from here. So they're all my headings. So if I go back here, down here, we've got an area where we can start building our table. So we think, well, what do we want in the row? What do we want in the column? And it really is as simple as deciding, okay, in the columns, we perhaps want author. So watch what happens. There's various ways of doing that, but I find the most satisfying is just simply dragging it and dropping it. Okay, and then what do we want in the row? So we're talking about the page type or the category. So page type, drag it into the rows. And there we go. So I've laid out my table. I've got my authors across in the columns and my page types in the rows. And now you're saying, but it's blank. There's no information there. That's no use. Well, I've not given the pivot table that information just yet because I've got this extra field down here called values. And that's what I want the data to count or do whatever with. In the case when we were looking at doing this by using filters, we looked at the page views. So let's use that as our data. Let's use that as our value. So I'm going to do the same again and just drag that down into values. And straight away, I've got so much information in front of me. Every single cell here, if I was doing it using a filter, I'd have to do that separately. Now I can see all that information all at once for all the authors and all the page types. It's telling me the sum of page views, which I know wasn't what we looked at in the example previously, so that's not a problem. If I'm not interested in the sum, I can click on this drop down here, value field settings, and change it to what we were looking at before, which is the average. And click OK. Okay, all it's done is update my table to reflect that information. And here's where people sometimes panic. If you click outside the pivot table, like so, everything disappears. And you think, oh, I've lost my pivot table. And you've not. It's just because you've clicked outside the data. As soon as you click back inside this table here, you get these two tabs popping back up and the good old pivot table fields pane over here. Pivot tables, you'll know your data better than anybody else, so you'll know what you want to get out of it. You maybe won't get it right first time, but that's not a problem. It's really easy to change things around. If I say, well, I don't actually want author on it at all, to get rid of it, I just drag it away until I see the black cross and drop there, and it just takes that off. Okay, so I can move things around real easily. One field that I've not used is this filters. We'll come to that in just a second. But you might be thinking, I maybe want to see the average of page views and the sum of the tweets and lots of different things. Unlike a standard table, you can only have one set of values, whereas in a pivot table, I could add page views in again, but this time I'm getting an average and a sum. I could add the tweets in, I could add the comments in, and look how good my table's building up to be. I could add links. So how much information am I taking out of that at the moment? Lots and lots. So I said we hadn't used this field yet. Maybe I've set up the perfect pivot table and I want to see that for different departments, different locations, different areas. At the moment, it's just showing me for everything. So in this example, I maybe want to see that information per author. So the filter field is just a way of pivoting that table around another field. So if I click and drag that in there, I can see I've got this extra option up here. And I can say, just show me that table for Justin. Okay, and so you get the idea of how that works. Okay, so that's the fundamentals of pivot tables. The world is your pivot table oyster after that, if you like. A couple of words of warning though. If I think this data has changed, so let's say some of this data has changed. So what you should do, if you think your data has changed, you've got this refresh button up here. So always do that. If you think your data has changed, click this refresh button. Okay, so a word of warning about pivot tables. The final thing about pivot tables, let me just add a few extra things in here. Maybe you're 100% okay with pivot tables, but you want to send this pivot table to somebody else who maybe doesn't understand what all these parts do, but they want to get the information out of the pivot table. They don't know that you can go up here and filter it. They don't know that you can click on a button, drag and drop. So there's a thing that you can add into a pivot table called a slicer. It's not as painful as it sounds, but it's giving the pivot table an easier user interface, a more friendly interface. If I click Insert Slicer, and if I choose one of these objects here, let's say author, and it does this. It's just an interface. If I didn't know I could change things up here, surely I know that I can press a button and the information updates. And I have seen people using these slicers to make a really good Excel dashboard. It's all about the button pressing. So slicers are a way of just slicing into your data. Okay, so that's a quick overview of pivot tables. And hopefully it's given you food for thought on what you can do with your lists. Okay, so to summarize what we looked at then, we started off by giving you a few shortcuts, and then we looked at how to sort the data. We then looked at how to filter the data, both the auto filter and the advanced filter. We looked at subtotals, so subtotaling the information at each change in data. We then looked at my favorite one, which was the flash fill. And also taking a step back from that, we looked at text to columns. There was a few more shortcuts in there. There's so many I can't remember all the shortcuts, but we finished off by looking at the pivot tables and how to create a pivot table from your data to get all information out of it the quickest and the smartest way. Okay, so that's really everything that I wanted to cover in this masterclass. Hope you've enjoyed this session and got a lot out of it. Answers on a postcard, how many times I said lists during the session. If it's given you food for thought on what else is possible, not just with Excel, but any Office application. So if you use Word for your reporting documents, PowerPoint for your marketing, your presentations, hopefully this has given you an idea that there's so much more it can do. And at Appetite, we love to help you get the most out of these applications. So please feel free to get in touch and see what else we can actually offer you.